It's important to start with a proper method. After, you will be able to adjust your own, adapted to your local vegetation, your physical condition, or simply your personal preference if needed. I don't work in a single position all the time. If there's a bump, I move my leg. Sometimes I end up in a really weird position when there is no space available, like in a swamp.
Each of the following items must be chosen with great care, because if you use the good one, it will save you a lot of energy, and so you will be able to work a little bit longer every time, and this has a huge impact on the result. The spindle can vary in size. It really depends on the type of wood that you're using, but I usually prefer to make mine quite large. That creates a bigger amount of dust but a less intense heat to avoid producing a carbonized dust. Your muscle will develop as any repeated exercise, and you will be able to work a little bit longer every time. The spindle is the most important part of the set and is the one that you should invest the time required to make it perfectly straight. Which can be a great challenge sometimes, because some species are often twisted, rotten. Sometimes you just do not have a lot of possibilities and have to deal with a slightly curved spindle.
A straight spindle will generate a constant heat and will require a lot less energy for you to keep it in place while bowing, allowing you to work a little bit longer on each try, and this makes the difference between success or fail.
These little shocks are very bad for two reasons. The dust won't stick in the notch, it will often fall off, and so the dust will not reach the ignition temperature needed, which is said to be 700 to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, the tip of the spindle will often follow the motion, slowly breaking the side of the hole on the board, and then you end up having to redo the whole process again. Take the time to make the spindle perfectly round. This will avoid creating additional little shocks as well.
As for the size of the spindle, I don't agree with the size given on many tutorials. Spindle should be made a lot longer than 5 or 6 inches, as an ember is not always produced on the first try. Making a new spindle after 45 minutes because the spindle is too small can be very annoying, especially when you feel you are so close of getting an ember.
The size of the spindle should be a little bit less than the distance between your foot and knee. This will allow you to adopt a much more comfortable and stable position when working. By doing this technique, you will not have to apply downward pressure, only put your weight on it. Also, this spindle is ready to go for an hour and a half at least.
That's it. On some of my video, you might realize that I'm not always using that size. It's because that day I couldn't find the appropriate piece of wood to do it. It's either that or that I've been working 1 hour before getting the ember that you see on the screen.
The top of your spindle should be smaller in diameter than the tip used against the board, as you want to minimize the friction on the handling block. As you work, not only the down tip will reduce, the top tip will also reduce, so you want to gradually go narrow on the top to the original diameter in the middle. So you see, not like that. The more surface area that are in friction, the more resistance you will get, and you want to avoid that to the maximum. The tip that will be in contact with the board should end like the letter V. Do not carve it too flat or too round, because it will get perfect by itself as you do the first burn-in on the board. If you make it too round or too flat, it will not produce a good burn-in, and that usually ends up doing this, which is annoying as the hole on the board is now useless.
I always use the same material in my spindle. I make my entire set from the same tree or branch, all the time. I never really understood the people saying to use a harder wood for the spindle. I guess it's to avoid the spindle to get smaller, but I find it to be harder to make an ember, as most of the dust comes from the hardboard and not from the board and spindle.
Take a larger branch or a bigger part of the tree than your spindle for your board. Break the part you need this way. And either split it like that, or I suggest to remove wood with your knife. It works better and you can really control the thickness of the board perfectly. And you won't end up with a twisted board, as it may happen when you split it. As for the thickness of the board, it really depends what kind of wood you are using and climate condition. When I use a good soft wood in perfect weather, I usually make a thicker board, as I know a number should be created very easily. Often the notch don't need to be filled completely too. What's good about a thick board is I know that I got multiple try before I need to make a new hole. But the bad thing is, as the spindle dig in the board, there's gonna be friction on the edge too, not only on the tip, making it harder and harder, so never exceed much more than 3/4 of an inch deep. You better make a new hole than working deeper than that.
When you use a harder wood, less dust will be produced, and often the ember is created only once the notch is full of dust and in direct contact with the tip of the drill. It can also be the case with a good soft set, but in bad weather conditions such as rain or very windy conditions. So as an ember is only created when the notch is full, you don't want to make a thick board that will take a lot of time to fill the notch in.
In that case, a thickness of a little more than 1/4 inch is good, but you might have to change oil a few times as you will pass through your board much faster. There is no need to make a perfect round hole in the board with your knife, except if you enjoy to do so. Your spindle will do all the work for you. With the tip of your knife, make a small hole with enough space to allow you to make a good notch. That won't be too small, which can end up in a useless hole. Do not make your notch too wide, as your spindle will be tempted to get off the hole. too small, the dust is compacted, often killing the ember by the lack of oxygen too. Make sure that your notch reaches the inside, but don't go too deep. You should stop right here.
You can use a pocket saw to make the notch. It works really good and there's a lot less room for a mistake or finger injuries. That said, I always prefer to use my knife. I don't want to get used to better tools, as if I'm stuck without them, I will be very comfortable during the whole process. That said, be careful when cutting the notch with your knife. Almost all of my merger cuts were done during this step.
Now for the handling block, the best material you can use is green wood, as the moisture in it will prevent your drill tip to get burned too fast.
The good thing is, you often don't need to make much more than 1 or 2 holes on that kind of handle. That said, I always hate to kill a small tree just to make a handle, so if possible, take a branch from a big tree, but it's not always possible depending on the kind of forest you're in.
When you use a dead handling block, the best is to use a hardwood such as maple, because your soft spindle will never get really deep in the handle. Same as my spindle and board, I make my handle from the same wood. It's just easier and faster. And of course that wood is soft, so I make a dozen of all in advance and change all every time that I take a break. By doing this, I am always on a fresh all and friction is almost inexistent.
The bad point about this is your spindle is getting smaller on both sides. The upside tip will also reduce quite fast, so you're gonna have to sharpen it up every time you take a little break, because the tip will get around pretty fast. The good point about this is a complete set is done pretty fast, and even more important, without injuring or killing any tree, so that's why I'm using this technique all the time.
That said, when I'm working with an unpredictable type of wood, or when I'm in a bad climate condition, I will usually put all the chance by my side and use a green wood handle. Some people make one hole on the handle and never change, even when that hole gets very deep, so to avoid too much friction, they will use green vegetation to lubricate the side, but I personally do not really enjoy this method because an enormous amount of friction can be added with a bad handle, which can make a huge difference in your stability and energy spent. The bow is also very important, because if it has waving knots like that, these bumps will hit your spindle as you are bowing. These shocks will make your dust to fall down as soon as it is created. It will not stick in the notch, making it very hard to reach the ignition temperature. With the good bow, these shocks will be inexistent and the experience will be much more smooth and fun for you, so keep this in mind when choosing it. The bow should be as light as possible. It is already physically hard enough. You don't want to also have to support the weight of a heavy bow, making a lot of vibration.
When you choose your bow, there's 2 options, a green branch or a dead branch, and the difference is quite simple. The green branch will be very light and flexible, so it is less likely to break under the tension. That said, once again you will injure a tree to do so. I highly suggest to use a dead branch. They are a little bit heavier, but just as effective.
When using a dead branch, make sure it has a natural curve in it to avoid shock on the spindle. So in good weather, I will always work with a dead branch. When using a bad set in a bad weather, I will cut a small green branch and make a super light bow. The length of the bow should be a little bit longer than the length of your arm to allow a complete motion and full bow strike. Not too long though, as the tip hit the ground it will get stuck in the roots, or in winter the snow fly off the ground and end up on your set and dust, which of course is not a good thing, as you may imagine. And now here's a good way to attach it.
To have a full strength and to avoid pain in your knee and back, it's important to be stable. There are 3 different positions that I want to talk today, but here's the most common one.
If you're right-handed, your left foot should be on the board to keep it in place. Most of your weight should be on that foot so the board never moves. Depending on the type of shoes you have, or if you're barefoot, the board should be placed in the middle of the foot, just like that. The knee of the right leg should be placed about 6 to 10 inches behind your left foot. Now you can balance yourself with your leg. It doesn't matter where you put that leg, as long as it's not on the way of your hand that is bowing, and as long as you're stable. If you're right-handed, the handling block should be held firmly in the left hand. The only way to keep a good control on your spindle is to lock your forearm on your tibia, and that is usually the first problem those beginning in friction fire will face. I usually like to gently blow during the whole process, as it spreads the smoke away from my face. It reminds me of breathing, and it will also feed the ember in oxygen as soon as it's created.
I have modified the first method a little bit to be more comfortable and have more strength. That said, a longer spindle and handle are required.
With a longer spindle, your forearm is much closer to your knee and almost directly on it, and this is exactly where you want it. But never go higher than this, or you will not be able to lock it in place. A longer handling block is also required. Make it about 12 inch long. So now you can lay down on it. In this position you can simply put your weight on the handle, releasing all your back muscle, making it much less painful on the long run. In the last summer I got a very bad cut on my left hand and been many weeks that I could not use this hand.
A few weeks without friction fire, are you kidding me? Hell no!
So I've been thinking about it for a few days and finally found a technique that allows me to make a bow drill fire one-handed. The first step is to find a green tree about 2 inches in diameter. Now give a good knife hit on the trunk so that when you take it down, half of the trunk is still attached to the ground. Make sure you do not break it completely. Take it down. Center the tip of the spindle with the tree and make a mark. Lift the tree and make a better hole with your knife. That is your handling block. Make a long board about 30 inch. Which will be kept in place by your left foot. To keep the board more firmly in place, a 12-inch stick will be placed like so. Then you can simply sit on your handling block and this will apply the downward pressure. Just like in a normal position, you will have to adjust that pressure by lifting up or down. I pretty much put 50% of my weight on my foot holding the board and the rest is sitting on the tree. You can also lay forward and put your weight on your left forearm. That way, once again, your back will be very grateful on the long run. The first thing to look for is the species you're dealing with in the forest you're in, especially in the forest you're walking for the first time. You will quickly see what you're going to work with. Sometimes I walk in a forest that has an incredible amount of dead wood, and when I'm lucky, these dead trees are a species that I know works well. When it happens, I can be very picky on the piece of wood that I will be using and choose the perfect wood for my set. Other time, the forest is very healthy and strong, made of hardwood with very little dead wood around, so now I know this journey will be a little bit more of a challenge and maybe I will have to walk a few hours before finding my set.
In this case, I never pass any potential good piece of wood without bringing it with me. I cut the piece I need, I make sure it's not rotten, even inside, and I continue my walk for a better piece of wood, and at the end, I choose the best option and I still keep the other one because we never know. They will be good firewood anyway.
Choosing the good species is essential and you will quickly realize it as each of them will work differently. But once you are in a part of the forest that offer interesting opportunities, don't simply use the first branch that you find.
The location of the tree in the forest, what type of trees surround it, the decomposition state, the growing pattern will really influence the result that you will get.
A piece of wood that still has its bark on, completely or not, should be avoided, especially when it still sticks on the wood like this. The reason is simple, it's not been dead long enough or the decomposition state could be better. These ones are more acceptable, the bark can be easily removed, it's been dead a longer period of time, the wood will be softer. The problem with bark is some are very good waterproof material even dead and will keep humidity inside for a longer period of time after rain, making these pieces less than ideal for a set as you can imagine. Never take wood that lay on the ground. The humidity inside of it make that piece of wood a poor choice for a set. So find a dead tree that is still standing, or if the tree is underground, maybe there is still some interesting branch pointing up far from the ground and always dry out by the wind and sun. Take more wood than you need to make the set. Instead of cutting only what you need and leave, cut a long branch and use it as a walking stick on the way. The size of a walking stick is more than you need to make a spindle and board, so if you get two walking sticks of two different areas, you're guaranteed to have at least a part of that stick good enough to make your set and the other one is spare wood if there's complication. A dead piece of wood well protected of the element will not be dried by the sun. Choose your wood in consequence of the weather, not only from today but the day before. That said, most of the time you want to get a piece of wood that was as protected as possible.
For a very long time, I've been thinking about making a series of videos on the good species to work with a bow drill set and the species to avoid, but before I begin this series, I want to make sure that you understand that pretty much every species will work easily when taken home and dry it in advance, but work with that very same species on the field and it will never work. So together we will go around and test many species and see how they work, and if they work, how good are they? Always make sure that the piece of wood you're using has its bark naturally peeled off, so you know that this piece of wood has a perfect decomposition state. It's also best to avoid any knots or wood injuries around the tip of the spindle and the hull of the board, because these injuries contain wood extract in bigger concentration and can change the kind of dust that you get. When I work with deciduous species, I never use a sapwood. I only use the heartwood, which usually give me much better results. So most of the time I try to find a 4, 5 or 6 inch dead tree or branch and make my set from the heart. Make your entire set from the same piece of wood. This way the wood really works together perfectly. It's best to avoid small branch of big trees, as the wood is often harder and do not give the same result, especially with deciduous trees. Well, let's break the glass with my personal #1 choice. Over the years, I tried to use as many species as possible. That said, I have to say, when I have the chance to find a balsam fir, I usually go for it. I like it because the wood is perfectly straight and you don't need to remove external wood at all. So for these two reasons alone, they make perfect choice when you're working without modern tool. Also very good in bad weather such as high humidity and rain. And finally, it's a species that give very constant result from trees to trees. With that species, don't be afraid to make big spindle. It will produce a nice dust that usually ignite easily and fast. So as you can see, the dust really stick together. It's a ball, and the dust is very fluffy, it's not compacted. I really like this kind of amber and this kind of dust. It's dark brown, it's not black. And when you blow on it in the tinder bundle, it stick together instead of flying all over the place like it's the case with some species. I like to work with cedar as much as I like to work with the balsam fir, and that's not something I will often say. Just like the balsam fir, you don't need to remove the external wood, so finding that kind of small tree is ideal because you got a spindle ready really easily. You can also use big dead branch from trees, but I would remove the external wood in this case. I personally avoid spindle-sized branch from big trees. So again, pretty much the same, a dark brown pile of dust that stick together, and this is perfect. Another interesting species to use, almost as effective as the one tested before. That said, as you make your spindle, you will feel that the wood is a little bit harder, and I've been struggling with that species in the past for that reason, so make sure that the decomposition state is perfect. I like to remove about half of an inch of the external wood, as the wood inside will be softer. I also like to make a good size spindle as it produces a good dust, and I personally have an easier time to succeed with a big spindle. Good option, but may require a little bit more work. And again, the same dust. This is the dust that you will get with almost every conifer, and this is what you're looking for. The white pine tree is very interesting because you can either use a dead branch straight enough still attached to the lower part of the tree, or simply use a small tree, which is even better in this case. It's a good idea to remove the cambium and layers of wood inside because it may still contain a little bit of resin. With that species, I like to make bigger spindle because the wood is very soft. Very nice dust right here. I think it's a good example of what I mean by fluffy but still stick together. This is why I like to use conifers. On all the conifer species tested before, the black spruce has to be my least favorite, the one that I try to avoid, and the reason is the wood is a lot harder than all the other species tested before, so it's gonna have a little impact on the result. It's gonna be a little bit harder to get the number. That said, the type of dust that we get is very good, so I still prefer to work with that than most of deciduous species. As you can see, today I'm working with small branch from big trees, and this is really something that I try to avoid. That said, in this area there's no small dead trees that I can use, so I'm gonna go with that. I know it's working, but try to find a small dead tree if possible. I think that what I don't like about that species is the fact that it's not constant in the result. In other words, one day you will get a number on your very first try, the other day you will be struggling a lot. And I like to trust the species I'm working with. I think I got a number. Yeah. Well, I thought I had a number, but I don't. What I do with that species is I don't try to get a number on my first try. I get this very nice dust. I take a little break, and then after I go for the ember. Nah, I don't think so. So, as we can see though, the dust is very, very nice. So I know that it's gonna work. What I do now is I take a little break, drink some water, and very often it's working after a little break. I was sure to have a number. I got no more strength. So this is gonna be the last try that I got with this hole, because as you can see it's getting too much on the side. So usually I'm working like that. This time I will twist the board towards me like that to make sure that I don't break the little membrane on the side.
So there's a problem, there's many problems right now. So I need to fix them and then after we will continue. There's no reason to continue when everything is against you. As you can see, my spindle is moving in the hole, and when that happens, usually I need to make a new hole. So this is among my last try. Look, it's getting looser and looser. Nah, I don't think. I need to make a new hole. See, he's gonna get off. No. So today it's a no-go. It's the second time that I tried to get an ember from that species, and that make that species a poor choice for a set. Still an option. Some days I had an ember on my first try. Alright, today I'm lucky. I found a small tree that is dead, and I'm gonna make my set from the hurt, and hopefully that's gonna make the difference. So as I was making my set, I could really feel that when you use a small dead tree, the wood is so much softer than when you use a small branch of a bigger tree, and that's gonna have a huge impact on the result. Look at this on my first try. The difference is insane. It's not that it's impossible with smaller branch, but they are a lot harder, and it's gonna have a huge impact on the type of dust that you get and on the result too. So as we can see, the dust is exactly the same as the Balsam Fir, Cedar, Spruce. So if you have to work with the black spruce, I highly suggest you to make your set from a small dead tree. Let's finish the conifer series in beauty with the jack pine. Without hesitation, I can really say that the conifer works incredibly good when it comes to making a set from freshly harvested wood. Jack pine is no exception to that. And I suggest try to find a small dead tree for your set, because most of the time the lower branch of a bigger tree will not offer any good opportunity. I really like to work with that species. Actually, I think that I prefer the jack pine over the white pine, because the white pine is sometimes a little bit too soft, but That species is just perfect.
Making an amber is one difficult thing at the beginning, but using all natural tinders can be very tricky too. It's important for you to understand that you need to use the good material in the good state if you want to catch that very small ember into flame, and that flame has to be strong enough to catch your kindling on fire too. In some very difficult conditions such as rain, the most difficult part is usually not to make an ember but to catch that ember into flame with the wet tinders around.
Natural tinders each got their positive but also negative characteristic. I don't often use a single tinder in a tinder bundle. Most of the time it's made of different layers and different tinders for a maximum of efficiency. This is how I like to make my tinder bundle. The third layer is a tinder that keeps everything in place. It may produce a lot of flame or not. I don't really care because here comes the second layer. Which is a tinder that produces a lot of flame. It may easily catch an ember on fire or not. I don't really care because here comes the first layer. The one in direct contact with the ember. This one is made of material that will really catch an ember easily and either make a very big ember quickly or produce a weak flame easily from an ember, giving enough time to catch the second layer on fire. Put the ember on the first layer, then cover it with the other layers, just like it was in a sweet bed. Gently blow at the beginning. The bigger the ember gets, the more oxygen you can provide.
Here's some example of tinders that I use and why I use them. That's it. You might have to adjust to your local vegetation.
Well, let's break the glass with my personal number one. I have to admit it's my favorite tinder, not because it's the best, but it can be found everywhere, which makes this specific tinder a very important one to practice with so you never get stuck. The punk wood is when a tree is rotten to the point that the wood is very spongy. It will catch an ember and quickly make it bigger and bigger, even when slightly humid, so of course it's a good option in raining conditions, because some dry piece can always be found somewhere. Like in this huge yellow birch trunk where it's protected by the waterproof bark, so even after weeks of raining where almost every other tinder is failed, the punk wood can still be interesting. Excellent tinder for the first layer. It is acceptable in second layer when mixed with a good third layer to keep everything in place and also to keep the flame alive a little bit longer. This material can be found inside the bark of dead populus tree. The good stuff are the hair that can be easily removed by hand. You will not find this material on every single dead populus tree. You need to find it in a specific decomposition state where the bark and cambium can be easily removed. Excellent tinder in second and third layer, but also efficient in first layer, so a very good option there. The other bark of the cedar tree can be removed on the surface, or the best is to find a dead tree that the bark is not attached. In the process, make sure that you don't reach the wood for two reasons. First, you will injure the tree, and second, it is useless in your tinder bundle. Now rub that bark in your hand for a few minutes. Sometimes the bark is very thick and difficult to break by hand. Use your knife or a piece of wood to break it. You will end up with this kind of hairy ball. It catches an ember very easily and doesn't take too long to produce a decent flame neither. Very efficient tinder for the first layer. It is acceptable in second and third layer. Some plants keep their leaves or flowers even when dead in winter. These are most of the time extremely dry and when choosing carefully are simply amazing. Some plants have very thin leaves that make a really good job in first and second layer. Others keep their flowers that are often airy and excellent choice for every single layers. Be opportunist. This plant naturally has the shape I want, so if I put 10 together, I have the perfect nest. Now fill that third layer with a good first and second layers. You're in business. One of the most famous and used tinder because it is probably the one that produced the biggest amount of flame. On each white or yellow birch tree, different thickness of bark can be found and they are all good in their way, but in my opinion, the thinner the better, especially in first and second layer. It is the most effective tinder in second and third layer and also very efficient in first layer when using very thin bark wrapped in your hand. The shell of the milkweed in winter is most of the time empty of their seed, but sometimes these air got stuck and dry up there. Same as cattail, it catch an ember so fast. That said, the flame is very brief. Also, it is an extremely good isolate material and protect very well the second layer, killing your ember sometimes. Not the best tinder, but still an option. When you remove the bark of the cedar,
Make sure you don't reach the trunk. Always keep bark on the tree so you don't injure it. I really like cedar bark, but today I thought I would use cattail, the fluffy material, simply because sometimes cedar is a little bit wet and it may kill an ember, so you don't want to take chance. Cattail really always make great tinder bundle material, except in rain condition, which is not the case today. I really like cedar bark and cattail, but still my favorite material for a tinder bundle is this plant. You harvest the bud at the end, and you mix it up with cedar bark or something like that. You are almost fire guaranteed. Make sure that you remove the snow before, because of course it will melt when you put it in your pants, and your tinder bundle material will be useless. This stuff is really, really, really good. This part will be my spindle, and I will make my herdboard from this. So I thought I would make my fire right here, but of course with the branch full of snow, you don't want to make a friction fire and then the snow fall on your ember. It's very frustrating, and it happens to me a few times. So what you want to do first is to remove the snow. Okay, oh, there's a hole. So it's better than it was. So I'm ready to harvest the kindling and make my set. not this time. Most of the time I don't get an ember on the first try. So take the time to make the upper side of the spindle sharp to remove the friction. Most of the time I get it on my second try, on this try. Because the wood has warmed up, and if there was a little bit of moisture, it may have dried a little bit. I'm not going to keep the first dust that I get. I will start over again, but I will keep it because I will add it to the ember at the end. Yep. Put your spindle in a safe place, because if you fail to catch your tinder bundle, you don't want to have to deal with a wet spindle. I dry my hand. And I will add the dust of the first attempt with my ember. This way I really have a big ember. These are the dead plant's leaves and the dead plant bud from the beginning. I make a tinder bundle from that, and I put my birch bark close. And as soon as I get a small flame, I will put the birch bark on top. I always take a small piece in my hand. This way it's very close, because dead plant leaves do not produce much flame. So it will produce a little flame, and you want to be ready, because if you take the time to go grab it, the flame will often be dead during this time. That's the piece of wood that I've chosen. This will be my spindle. It will start right here as long as possible, and I will make my herdboard from these.